Life Audio.
Welcome to Christian Natural Health with naturopathic Dr. Lauren DeVille. Christian Natural Health is the podcast on how to get and stay healthy, God's way. You'll hear topics on nutrition, exercise, sleep, avoiding toxicity, meditating on scripture, what supplements to take, stress management, defeating anxiety and worry, how to reconcile Eastern medicine approaches with Christianity, and a whole lot more. Now, here's your host, Dr. Lauren.
Welcome back to another episode of Christian Natural Health. Today, I'm very pleased to have Raeanne Newquist with us. Raeanne, her husband, and 3 children joined Mercy Ships in 2019. After leaving everything behind in Southern California, they boarded the Africa Mercy in Las Palmas and made their way to Dakar, Senegal for their first field service. On board, Raeanne volunteered in communications department and later the chaplaincy. Currently, Raeanne works in the Mercy Ships U.S. marketing department. Raeanne is the host of the new Mercies podcast and is the voice of the Mercy Minute daily radio broadcast and serves as a staff writer. Welcome, Raeanne. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So first, for listeners who maybe aren't familiar with Mercy Ships, can you give us some of the background of like when it started, why it started, all of that?
Yeah. So we've been around for about 45 years.
Wow.
And it all began with a young man in rural Colorado. Our founder, Don Stevens, God gave him a vision for hospital ships when he was a young boy, which is kind of crazy because living in Colorado, there's no oceans or ships in sight.
Right.
But it was very specific. And then his life just kind of took him to different experiences and meeting different people that led him to the point of starting Mercy Ships and acquiring his first ship, I believe in Greece, and, with partners and donors and so forth. And then for the last 45 years, the ministry has just been growing and evolving. Currently, we have 2 hospital ships, and one is in Madagascar at this moment, and the other one is in Sierra Leone. And we have the world's largest non-governmental hospital ships, and we perform free, life-changing, and in many cases, life-saving surgeries for impoverished people in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay. And we've got crew that are volunteer on board our ships from all over the world. Yeah. It's, quite an incredible community that come and give their time and their resources to volunteer to impact others. So, it's an incredible mission to be a part of.
That's amazing. So the founder then was an entrepreneur, not a surgeon, right? It sounds like.
Yes, he's not medical at all.
Okay. Wow. And so he made it all happen and then just went out there and recruited and advertised, this is what I'm doing. And the people came. Essentially?
Well, kind of.
Okay.
I mean, it's a much bigger story. He probably would tell it. He will tell it much better than I ever could. But he was working alongside a different missions organization, and it just kind of birthed out of that. There were a lot of people. He is an entrepreneur and a businessman, very connected, and a bridge builder. Connects people all the time, and so just his personality. Was such that he, got a group together and just, started this mission.
My goodness. So when you acquire a ship, I'm just curious, like the logistics of how do you turn it into a hospital ship? What was involved with all of that?
Right. Well, in the beginning, the vessels that they used, they weren't hospitals on board. So the vessels would sail to different places and maybe set up clinics and help people off ship. It wasn't until later that we purchased what is now the Africa Mercy. It was a Danish rail ferry. And then they took that into shipyard and had it converted. So it's almost like doing a house reno, except you're doing it with a ship. They pull the ship out of the water and we'll just, tear stuff down and rebuild and totally converted it into a hospital ship.
Wow. Okay. And so Africa concentration, any particular reason, like why just Africa, or are there visions to expand beyond there, or what was the reason for that?
Yeah, initially there were things that they did in Central America and in the Caribbean and, different places. Yeah. But, 50% of the population are located near a coastline in our world. And so the continent of Africa is massive and the need is so great. Just the lack of medical care in these nations is really overwhelming. And so rather than kind of being everyone everywhere. It's like,
Yeah.
you know what? We can really concentrate and build relationships with several nations in Africa
Right.
along the coast
Yeah.
and really have the biggest impact there. So that's currently our concentration with our two vessels.
Yeah.
And who knows what God has in the future, but definitely right now we're focused in sub-Saharan Africa.
That makes sense, as opposed to just diversifying and then kind of not having nearly as big an impact in a whole lot of different places, kind of a thing.
Yeah, we build a lot of relationships with
Yeah.
the governments and the ministries of health where we serve.
Mhm.
And so we return to these nations,
Right.
because we've built relationships. And so that takes a lot of time to
Sure.
really lay the groundwork, to have our screening teams
Yeah.
understand the systems where we're going. And so if we can, be excellent by really focusing, then I think that's
Sure.
definitely one of our core values. And
Sure.
so that's what we've done.
Makes sense. And what's your story? How did you guys decide, especially your whole family in 2019? What happened? What led you to that?
Yeah. Well, my husband and I, when we first met, he was a pastor at a church in Southern California.
Yeah.
But then he left pastoral ministry to go into law enforcement and to minister to the law enforcement community by being one of them.
Yeah.
And after 20 years of that, he felt like he really wanted to get back into full-time ministry and retire,
Yeah.
but didn't know exactly what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Didn't really want to go back into a church. So we're kind of looking around at different opportunities. And a couple years before that, a friend of ours came to us and said, "Hey, would you be willing to support me financially? I'm going to be going to volunteer as a kindergarten teacher with Mercy Ships."
Oh,
Now, you might be thinking,
yeah.
kindergarten teacher on a
I
hospital
know.
ship? This makes no sense, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But our ships are really floating cities. And when
Wow.
families come on board to serve, there's kids
Yeah.
on board and the kids need to go to school. So on our ships, we have fully accredited academies
Oh
with
my.
teachers from all over the world that teach the children.
Yeah.
So our girlfriend was going to be a kindergarten teacher, volunteer. We, all our crew are volunteers and raise their support to be there.
Yeah.
And anyways, we said, sure, we've never heard of Mercy Ships, but we like you, so we'll
Yeah.
support
Right.
you. But
Sure.
really, through that relationship, we got to learn about Mercy Ships because she would FaceTime us on board and give us little
Sure.
tours. And so my husband, looking at opportunities to serve after retirement, looked at Mercy Ships, and they were hiring a chaplain for 2 years,
Yeah.
starting in 2019. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, the timing is perfect."
Yeah.
And anyways, we brought it up with the children and kind of thought they're our number one priority. So if they're not in, we're not doing this. But
Yeah.
the kids were excited. My son was 10 years old. My twin daughters were 13. And they said, "Yeah, we'll do this for a couple years."
Yeah.
And we thought it would be longer than 2 years.
Sure.
We expected fully to extend our commitment into 3 and 4 years, but
Yeah.
we got on board in 2019 and we all know what happened, not too long after that. So everything kind of came to a screeching halt in 2020,
Yeah.
but it was absolutely an adventure of a lifetime. I mean, there's not a week, really not a couple days that don't go by where we are referencing life on the ship in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
It left its mark on all of us forever.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what did happen? I mean, obviously I know what happened in the world, but for you guys in 2020, did all the surgeries stop for a period of time? How long? What happened?
Yeah, it was kind of funny because we had some friends from the United States that were going to come visit us, and they were due to arrive March 12th, Thursday, March 12th.
Mm.
And they were coming for 2 weeks to visit. And so we had been in conversations a couple weeks prior, and my friend said, "Okay, so are you guys still allowing people to get on the ship, and visitors?" And I said, "Well, yeah. What are you talking about,
Right.
And she said, "Well, there's just this stuff going on, there's some like virus and, now it seems like it's in Europe." And,
Mm.
I just said, "No, everything here is business as usual. We have crew that fly in from all over the world every day. There's
Yeah.
people coming on and off, according to their rotation. Some of our surgeons will come for 2 weeks. And
Sure.
so they're flying in and someone else is flying out. I mean, we're
Right.
just constantly making airport runs." I said, "No, everything's business as usual here,
Right.
Their flights were supposed to go through Paris
Yeah.
and they were going to have a layover there before they came on down to Dakar. And, a week before, my girlfriend said, "I think we're going to eliminate the Paris aspect of our trip because it sounds like now this virus is in France." And again, I was like, "Oh, okay, I don't know, whatever."
Sure. Yeah.
So they get on board March 12th of 2020 on Thursday. And everything was business as usual. We literally had not heard hardly anything about COVID-19. We did
Sure.
not know what was going on.
Yeah.
We were isolated on our
Yeah,
ship.
right.
There was no COVID in Senegal. There was no
Sure,
COVID
yeah.
in West Africa. So we're like, hey,
Yeah.
and then the next day, by Saturday the 14th, we had shut down everything. And obviously our leadership and executives had been more informed than some of us just general crew,
Sure,
and they had
yeah.
been working on stuff prior. But the issue for us was we are not infectious disease. So a lot of people were like, why would you leave? Why wouldn't you stay and help? Well, we don't have, the ICU beds and the ventilators and all that kind of stuff. We do surgery.
Right.
So basically, if COVID were to come on board our vessel, we would have to admit to local hospitals, and we would essentially overrun the system that we came to support and help. So we knew we had to get out as fast as we possibly could. Now, that's a massive undertaking, because when we pull into a port, we will stay docked for 10 months to do all of our surgical rotations. And it takes us at least a month, if not more, to set up the operation before we even open the hospital on board. There's tents that are erected on the dock for screening and for rehabilitation for patients. There's a whole city that needs to be set up.
Right.
So to all of a sudden have to tear it down in 2 weeks, what took a couple months to set up, it was really crazy, to say the least. I mean, you're working 24 hours a day. On top of it, there's, the panic of what is happening. Oh my gosh, the world is shut. The airport's going to close. What the heck, and a lot of our people wanting to get out to go back to their home countries, especially the medical professionals, to serve and help their own people. And it was a really difficult time, to say the least.
I can imagine. Yeah. And when did you guys reopen again?
So we were down for about 2 years. And when we as a family got off the ship, we stayed until the end of May. Right. And when we returned to the United States, Mercy Ships said, well, we're going to go back in October. So we're like, okay, we'll just wait, and then October comes and we're going to go back in January. And, nobody knew. And so it was almost, I think, about 2 years that our ships were out of service and waiting until February of 2023. We went back to Senegal, where we left, and really got to go back and care for all the patients that were waiting, that we had promised surgery dates to, and then had to tell them, I'm sorry, we can't do it, but we will come back. We just don't know when. And we made good on all those promises.
Oh, praise God. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How crazy. My goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned like 10 months at a time. So when volunteers volunteer, is that the length of the contract? How long is the contract for each individual person?
Yeah, it's very different according to what role you're playing on board.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, some of our specialty surgeons will just come for 2 weeks, and they'll do as many surgeries as they can in that rotation. Right. Some of our nurses will come for a rotation. So they'll just come for plastics, or they'll just come for orthopedics. Mm-hmm. And that could be, orthopedics usually lasts a lot longer because those kids have a lot of, rehabilitation. But nurses will come for maybe 4 to 6 weeks. Usually about 3 months is a typical duration of service for our nurses. Obviously, they can stay way longer than that if they want to. Yeah. But we have people who come and serve in housekeeping, who come and serve in the galley and the dining room. A lot of those are like 3-month commitments. Right. Our teachers usually commit for 2 years, but sometimes they might just be able to come for 1 school year. Yeah. It kind of varies. Right. But it just depends on what role you play on board. So no, people aren't usually coming just for the 10 months and leaving. Right. It's depending on our needs on board. And it's also dependent upon the role that you're playing of the length of your service.
Yeah. And you said these are like floating cities. How many people? Is this like a cruise ship, like that number of people kind of a thing?
Maybe a small cruise ship. So one of our ships, the Africa Mercy, has 8 decks. And then our Global Mercy, I believe, has like 13 decks. So the Global Mercy on the outside looks much more like a cruise ship. The Africa Mercy might be like a more smaller cruise ship, if you will. Yeah. But yeah, there's hundreds and hundreds of people that serve on board. So the Africa Mercy, our smaller vessel, there's probably about 700 crew on board, including patients and also some local people. We employ about 250 or so local people when we pull into a port to come on board. They don't live on board, but they come on board to work each day as our translators, as our cultural translators.
Yeah.
And they help in every single department.
Yeah.
So yeah, upwards of 700 or so. And then on the global Mercy, I'd say that pushes more like maybe 1,200, I would say. Don't quote me on the numbers here.
Sure.
But yeah, they're large vessels.
Yeah.
Not as massive as, like Carnival Cruise Lines or anything like
Right.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't
But
have bowling alleys and go-karts, but
right. Yeah.
there are swimming pools, however.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good.
But yeah.
So tell us about some of the kinds of surgeries that you perform, like maybe some of your favorite stories.
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many. I'll tell you a little overview of what we do.
Yeah.
We do a maxillofacial surgery rotation where we see patients with these large benign tumors on their face, their neck, sometimes their back. And those tumors will grow to such a size that they become deadly because they can suffocate people. A lot of times the tumors are growing in their mouth. It comes partially from poor hygiene, dental care that is lacking. So we do maxillofacial surgery. We do cleft lip and palate. We do cataract removal. We also do an orthopedics rotation with kids with very severe windswept legs or very severely bowed legs. It's amazing how twisted some of these bones can be due to malnutrition or maybe a misplaced vaccine that can kind of kill a muscle. And so we go in and straighten their legs, and it's pretty unbelievable what these surgeons do, but it's amazing. So we've got the ortho rotation. We do a plastics rotation for burn contractures. In developing nations, a lot of people cook over open fires, and it is cause for multiple accidents in children. And if they're burned severely, they don't have somewhere to go to get wound care in a timely fashion. And so their wounds will heal, oftentimes fusing skin together and fusing it in a way that they lack mobility in their arms and legs, because maybe all their fingers, fuse together and they just now have like a fist. Or, if their parents held them and wrapped them up tightly because they were on fire and they were scared, well, then the skin will fuse together, So anyways, we go through and remove those contractures and free them, and then do physical therapy to help regain mobility. We also have a women's health rotation where the women come to us. They are suffering from fistula, which basically means hole, often a hole in their bladder where they're leaking urine. And that really is caused by a prolonged labor. So in these developing nations where they don't have access to medical care or hospitals, you go into labor and all of a sudden something goes wrong, but you don't have anywhere to go. So some of these women will labor for days. The babies will pass away. And when they're finally able to pass the fetus, these women are left with bodies that are torn apart. And in leaking urine, they become outcasts in their society because they smell and nobody wants them around. We had a woman on board named Rugi, and this was her story. Yeah. She had labored for 5 days and then was left with just, a broken body, and her husband abandoned her. Her community totally shunned her. And she lived out in the bush alone for 10 years. And every night she would take off her dress and wash it and hang it to dry. In the morning, she'd put on a dry dress for maybe an hour or two before it would be wet again. And this is how she lived her life, a total outcast in society. And we found Rugi. Our screening teams go out months before our ships even arrive in port, and they are looking for patients that we can help specifically. And they'll go out into rural villages and find people. And Rugi was found and brought to the ship. And her healing began long before she ever went into surgery, because this woman was met by a nurse on the dock from Australia, a friend of mine, Kelly, and Kelly reached out to hold her hand, and Rugi held her hand back so severely because she had not been physically touched in over 10 years. No one had even touched her. And she could not believe that someone was touching her, because there's this fear that you are cursed and you are contagious. If I touch you, I will get your curse. And so in these communities, if you have a tumor, nobody wants to be around you because they don't want to get a tumor themselves. Just the lack of education is heartbreaking. But Rugi came on board, and was so blessed by the touch of that nurse and then the touch of many people, but also to be overwhelmed coming on board and finding, maybe 10 or 15 other women who had her exact same condition, whereas she thought she was all alone for all these years. And these women bond together, these patients, and they form their own community of healing and of hope, of caring for one another and sharing with one another. It's incredible. But these women on board, after they receive their free surgery and they're dry for the first time in years, we throw a huge party for them called the dress ceremony. And in Africa, the African fabrics are absolutely fabulous. If you're considering coming and volunteering with us, a little side note is the shopping is great. You get to these fabulous fabrics that are so colorful and incredible patterns. And there's tailors that will make clothes for you that's very inexpensive. But we have new dresses made for all the women and headdresses, and they get to put on these beautiful clothes, these new beautiful clothes, and we throw a big party for them with drums and dancing and music, and a lot of the crew come and celebrate with them. And we just celebrate the new life that they've been given in so many ways. It's just like what Jesus does for us. He takes the broken parts of our lives and heals us and restores us and makes all things new in us and kind of clothes us with a new identity and says, you might have been told that you were an outcast, but you are wanted to me. You might have been told that you are good for nothing and you are worthless, but to me, you are valuable. And it's just this beautiful, beautiful ceremony to watch new life spring forth.
Yeah, beauty for ashes. I love it.
Absolutely.
So cool. Wow. So, and I imagine that, you're not going to get that in a lot of other settings. You probably make bonds for life with the other volunteers there, right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It's really about joining a family. When you get on board Mercy Ships, our patients' lives are transformed.
Right.
But every single person who steps foot on the vessel, their life is forever changed. And really a big part of that is the community on board. We've got 50 to 60 nations represented on board at any given time because people come from all over the world to serve. So you're living in this multicultural community of highly accomplished professionals in their fields who have come with one common purpose, and that is to bring hope and healing to the world's forgotten poor. And so there's no hierarchy on board. There's no one's getting paid. Everyone's volunteering, so there's no status, to impress people with. However, everyone is extremely impressive, if you start to hear people's experience. But just that community that forms on board is so powerful. People, from all walks of life and from all different countries, all different generations on board. We have kids on board. As I mentioned, my kids were on board, but we have people who are retired who are coming back and they're like, I don't want to sit around and play golf. I want to give my life away. I want to go and serve. But yeah, you bond for life. And then you've got friends all over the world to go visit, you've got a place to stay anywhere. But the community is really what brings our volunteers back year after year after year. As they say, I loved my life on board. The community is so incredible.
Yeah, that's great. So as far as the volunteering opportunities, obviously medical professionals, but sounds like almost anybody, you can find a place for them, right? Are there
100%.
Yeah. Are there specific areas where this is a really big need? They really need this type of volunteer?
There are always some, yes, big needs. And oftentimes those do fall in the medical realm and in the maritime realm. We are always needing captains and engineers. We often need, sterilization technicians. That's probably not the proper terminology, but people that can help us do safe surgery, the biomedical engineers, all those guys that fix the equipment and stuff in the hospitals. Those are always urgent needs for us. And nurses, gosh, we always need nurses. But yeah, if you can do it, we need it. We need carpenters on board, electricians, preschool teachers. Everything, baristas. There's a place for everyone on board.
Right. Very cool. So what have I not asked you that you want to make sure you leave with our audience?
Oh gosh. I think it would just be encouragement that if God is stirring in your heart to do something different with your life, maybe you are a medical professional and you're kind of feeling burned out a little bit. I hear this from nurses all the time, that, gosh, I just get moved from room to room to room so quickly with a little window of time. I don't even get to care for the patients that I got into this profession for in the first place. Then maybe it's time to just take a little break and come and serve and have your tank filled up again. If God is speaking to you in any way, the best place we can possibly live is in obedience to him. And yes, it is a lot of work on board, but my gosh, the rewards far outweigh what you could possibly give. And it's just a great adventure. I mean, to get to live in these countries, we get off ship all the time. I learned to surf in Africa, even though I lived 10 minutes from the beach for 30 years in Southern California. But, there's so many great restaurants to explore in the markets and the people, the local people. It's a total adventure, but also to be a part of something so much bigger than yourself that's eternal is absolutely incredible. So I would say if anybody, just even has some curiosity, just go to our website, check it out. Go to YouTube, type in Mercy Ships, the videos, grab a box of Kleenex, and watch the videos of the patient transformations. Some of them are only 5 minutes long, but my gosh, you'll get a real picture for what we do and how everyone really can be used to make an impact to change someone's life forever.
Okay, that's awesome. So speaking of the website, where can people go to learn more and possibly find out if they might want to volunteer?
Yeah, mercyships.org/serve is the best place to go to get a whole list of opportunities, and just our website in general, mercyships.org. You can find ways to give to the mission of Mercy Ships. We invite everybody to pray for our patients and for our crew, and then absolutely come experience it for yourself. Get on board.
Awesome. Very cool. So I will include the link to that in the show notes, and thank you, Raeanne. This has been really inspirational.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Are you looking for a holistically minded healthcare practitioner who truly treats root cause rather than symptom suppression? Unfortunately, even in the alternative healing professions, this isn't a given. That's why I've created wholehealthdoctor.com, a resource to help connect patients to healthcare practitioners in their area who share a root cause philosophy. Alternatively, most of the practitioners listed also practice telehealth. So if there isn't anyone local to you, you can still find a great practitioner to help you regain optimal health. Go to wholehealthdoctor.com. That's wholehealthdr.com. Type in your location or adjust the specialty that you're looking for and find the practitioner who's right for you.
Thanks for listening to Christian Natural Health. This show is run by you, so please write in with topic and guest suggestions for future shows. For more great content, subscribe to Dr. Lauren's blog at www.drlaurendeville.com or follow her on Facebook or Twitter at Dr. Lauren DeVille. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to share it with your friends and give us a 5-star rating in iTunes. It really helps us to stand out so other people can discover great content as well. Have a great week and God bless you.